The world's most successful people didn't get there by being good at sales, marketing, or programming. They got there by mastering one skill: decision making. So in this video, I'm going to show you how billionaires think, the 4 principles they use for decision making, and a simple practice to make this part of your daily habits. My name's Micaiah, and I built and sold a company for 9 figures to a billionaire, worked directly with him for 2 years, and raised over $20 million from some of the best billionaire investors on the planet. We've all been in that state where we can't sleep because we can't decide. It's paralyzing. It feels like the whole world's weight is on your shoulders, and that makes making the decision even harder. So how do you decide in moments like these when the decision itself can alter the course of your entire life? Well, it turns out the way to make decisions on what school to go to, what movie to watch, or even how to build a billion-dollar company all require the same principles. I discovered the first principle when I was actually locked in a fight in between 2 billionaires. I was raising $5.4 million for a seed round, and one of the billionaires wanted to kick the other billionaire out of the funding round because they, quote, provided no value. But one of the billionaires had committed to invest early, and the second billionaire, the one that wanted to kick them out, was committing to invest 10 times more. So my problem was I couldn't decide which investor to go with. Here's how I got my answer. I was on a walk through San Francisco, catching up with one of my other investors, and I was explaining the situation to him, and he sat me down on some steps and said, "Listen to me. The reason you're having such a hard time with this decision is because you're trying to make decisions the way everyone else does. They encounter a problem, come up with a solution. It's a one-stage decision-making framework. Hard decisions actually need 4 stages. I call it the 4 steps to clarity. The first stage is to get super specific on the outcome that you want from this decision. I want both billionaires to invest. Second is to start gathering data. So I started asking around, has anyone ever encountered this before? Has anyone dealt with this billionaire that's trying to kick the other billionaire out? That leads to step 3, which is evaluating your options. And I looked at it and I said, I think I can probably push back and change this billionaire's mind. So then step 4 is to decide and commit to the action. So in this case, I called up the billionaire that was investing 10 times more. And I said, listen, our relationship here, this thing that we're building together, is going to be based on trust. And I already promised this other billionaire that he could invest in the round first. He thought it over and said, you know what? Okay, I totally understand where you're coming from. They can invest, we'll also still invest 10 times more, and everybody was happy. But where this becomes really powerful is when you combine it with this next principle, which comes directly from Elon Musk, is one of the biggest keys to his success. Early on, Tesla had a big problem: the battery cost. It was simply too expensive to manufacture. And so Elon knew if he could get the price of the battery down, he could have a successful EV company. But how do you do it? He negotiated as hard as he could, but the best breaks you get were like 10%, 20%. It wasn't enough to actually move the needle. But here's where the genius comes in. You see, most of us make decisions by what are called analogy. Batteries cost this much. If we're lucky, we'll get them a little bit off. But he looked at, well, what's inside a battery? It's a steel case. Inside there's some cobalt, some aluminum, some nickel, some other materials. And it turns out if you add all those elements together, the cost is 87% cheaper than a standard battery. So then Elon had his solution. He said, listen, our goal is to get as close as possible to this 87% reduction in cost. He didn't get 87% less, but he got closer to 80% less, far better than standard negotiating. Now, this is called first principle thinking, and let me give you a super easy way to put this into practice in your own life. What you want to do is, whenever you come across a problem, you want to start listing what are the fundamental truths at play here, and what is actually not true. What are things that we can challenge or question, and what are the underlying assumptions that we're actually making? I saw this firsthand at Upstart with one of the founders, Paul Gu. Everyone knew that when you presented a plan to Paul Gu, he wouldn't question your plan. No, he would question the underlying assumptions. Why do you think this is this way? Why do you think this will happen in this manner? Why do you think this variable is what it is? Why do you think this will play out the way it does? By asking those questions, he would either decide your plan is really solid because the core fundamentals build up to the correct answer, or there are some shaky foundations in your plan or your decision, and you need to go back and evaluate them. It was one of the most valuable things I ever saw firsthand, and I think it's why they're still worth billions of dollars. But you don't need to sell your company to Upstart or get grilled by Paul. All you need to do is the next time you come to a decision, list out what are your assumptions, what are the fundamental truths here, and what are the things that we can actually challenge and make a difference on this decision. Now, just combining these first 2 principles is so powerful, but as you may have noticed, you can end up wasting a lot of time going back and forth with these 2 frameworks. You've probably experienced this firsthand, where you ended up wasting months or even years on a decision because of decision paralysis. And you might think it's because the decision was hard, but it's actually because of a problem you don't even realize you're facing, which is, in order to make a decision, you first need to figure out the exact amount of time you should be allocating to the decision itself. The next principle actually comes directly from Jeff Bezos on an internal document that he wrote to teach his executives how to make better decisions at Amazon. Amazon was facing a life or death problem. The executives were in decision paralysis. The company simply wasn't moving forward because the executives were too scared to decide, thinking they were going to make the wrong choice. So Jeff Bezos wrote them a memo saying, what's probably happening is you're looking at your decisions as what Jeff Bezos calls one-way doors. And what Jeff taught the executives at Amazon is to start categorizing decisions in one-way doors, which are irreversible. You walk through those, can't go back, huge consequences. Or most decisions are two-way doors. You can walk in, try it out, see how the room looks. If you don't like it, you can just go back, go through a different door. So the next time you find yourself facing a tough decision, ask yourself, which is this? Is this a one-way door decision, or is it actually just a two-way door decision? And then once you know which one it is, then you can decide exactly how much time to allocate to the decision. If it's a two-way door decision, just make the decision. Maybe spend an hour, an afternoon, but then go through that door, try it out, and if you don't like it, you can always go back. But if it's a one-way door, Jeff's advice is actually to slow down. He used to call himself the chief slowdown officer because he wanted to extend the time on decisions that were critical as long as possible, so we could analyze the decision in multiple ways, which is exactly what I'm going to show you in the next 3 frameworks. By the way, if you've been looking at the subscribe button, now would be a great time to hit it. So our first decision-making framework, this is the exact tool I used to figure out the business idea for the company I sold for 9 figures, and I even used it to figure out where to go on my honeymoon, although we almost ended up in North Korea, which I'll tell you about in a second. The tool is called a weighted decision matrix, and there are 5 steps to use it. First, list out all the factors and variables involved. For example, in our honeymoon, we valued somewhere that was unique, interesting, comfortable, beautiful, and so we made a list of all those different factors. Second step, you're going to assign a rating on how important that factor is to you in this decision on a scale of 1 to 10. So maybe we rate comfort a 7, but uniqueness a 10, and interesting a 10. Go through your list and rate each factor. Step 3, you're going to list all the options that you're choosing from. So for us, that's Thailand, that's Italy, that's the Philippines, that's Indonesia. In my example, that would be listing out honeymoon destinations, but it's whatever options are available for your decision. And then step 4, you're actually going to go and rank each option on each variable. So I might rank something like the Maldives a 10 out of 10 for beautiful. And then step 5, you simply multiply the value for each factor by the importance that you've given it and add the total up for each option. And from there, you have your winner. It's just the highest ranked one. Now, I should warn you, this can go a bit sideways. This is how we almost ended up in North Korea, because we'd ranked, uniqueness a 10 out of 10, interesting a 10 out of 10, and all of a sudden, North Korea, which I put as a joke, emerged at the top of our list. What I realized is we had weighted some of the factors wrong. We had weighted comfort a little bit too low and unique and interesting just a little bit too high. So we went back and tweaked the factors a bit. Hey, you know what? I think we actually weren't in our right mind when we put the ratings here. And by doing that, we saved our honeymoon from ending up in North Korea, ended up going swimming with whale sharks in the Maldives. If all of these principles and frameworks seem like a lot to remember, don't worry. I made a handy guide that explains all of them. I will put a link in the description below. So the next decision-making framework is actually one that you're gonna go to whenever you're feeling stressed, overwhelmed, or just feel like there's just too much to do. It's called the Eisenhower Matrix. During World War II, Eisenhower was the supreme commander of the Allied expedition forces in Europe. Every decision he made could affect the future of the entire world. But with so many decisions to be made, which bases to defend, where to deploy troops, he was completely overwhelmed. And what Eisenhower figured out was he was making his decisions incorrectly. Instead of just trying to make more and more correct decisions, he needed to start by figuring out which decisions were worth making in the first place. And the way to do that is to use what's now known as the Eisenhower Matrix. To use it, you're going to make a quadrant into 4 categories. And the axes will be urgent and important. So you'll have urgent, important, urgent, not important, not urgent, and not urgent but important. So those are the 4 categories. And then what you're going to do is you're going to list out everything that you're thinking about doing and put it in one of these 4 quadrants. And then you're just going to follow the next 4 steps. So for not urgent, not important, you delete it. You just don't do it. It's not urgent or important, so why would you waste your time doing it? The next step is to handle your urgent but not important tasks. And the default for these is to delegate them. Ask someone else to handle them, or frankly, my personal favorite, delete these as well. They're urgent, but they're not important. Don't waste your time doing them. But that brings us to the third step, which is the urgent and important. Urgent and important tasks need to be handled right away. So they should go right onto your to-do list for that day so you can knock them out. But the most important list is actually your not urgent but important. These are usually your higher leverage tasks. And as a general rule of thumb, the more of your life is spent doing not urgent but important things, the more leverage you have on your life. And the more you spend your time on the urgent and important side, or the urgent and not important side, the more stressed out you will be. And what you want to do with these not urgent but important tasks is you want to time block your calendar to schedule time to directly handle them. You're going to block out all distractions and really focus in on these. The reason these are so important is because in life, if you're constantly running on a treadmill, you're feeling busy, you can get caught in a death loop where you're checking off your to-do list and technically getting stuff done, but you're never making the big strategic moves that fundamentally move your life forward. So by blocking out time to work on the most important tasks of the week, I usually schedule mine from 10 a.m. to noon with a nice coffee during my weekdays. You have already pre-scheduled the activities that will move you forward in life versus just being on a treadmill going nowhere. Now, all of these frameworks are extremely powerful, but there's still one major problem, which is you need to be level-headed to use them. And sometimes you're so stressed out and worried, you won't be able to make effective decisions at all. And this final framework, which I actually came up myself, is the cure. And it's my go-to whenever I'm just feeling completely overwhelmed, anxious, and I have those running thoughts that I just can't put to bed, often keeping me up at night. I call it my decision stream of consciousness. And what you're gonna do is whenever you have that moment where you're overwhelmed, just get out a journal, pen and paper, not digital, and start writing. And what I do is I write down everything that's on my mind. You know, I can't believe that this thing happened. I'm really worried about money. I'm worried about my finances. That investment went south. I write it all down. And then I start asking questions written in ink on my paper to myself. Is this really true? Is this really as bad as it seems? Could there be other options that could be available to me? And I'm writing all these down. And as I write them down, I answer them myself. And what I've found is that just writing them down often reduces my anxiety level. And this alone helps me make better decisions. And with that, we land at the final but most important part of this video, which is how do you actually get good at the skill of decision making? I've given you some principles, I've given you some frameworks. Now, theoretically, you could go use these frameworks perfectly right now. But because your skill in decision making still isn't strong yet, you might end up using the right frameworks to make the wrong decisions. If decision making is a skill after all, how do you train that skill? You're gonna do what's called a decision audit. And I do this once every 12 months. I will grab my journal again and I will list out what are all the key important decisions that I made in the last 12 months. I'll list them all out. And for each decision, I ask myself, now that I can look back, was this actually the right decision? Are there things that I would do differently now? And then the most important part, what are the lessons learned? As you build the skill of world-class decision making, early on, you're gonna make mistakes. And the goal is not to never make mistakes. The goal is to learn from your mistakes, imprint those lessons into your DNA so you don't make them twice. And this is what separates the average person from, the billionaire, the world's most successful people, is they get really good at decision making. They treat it like a skill that they hone and refine year after year, and that growth compounds. Want to learn more about me and some of the life lessons that got me to this place where I'm at today? I'll put a link to another video I did over here. It has everything that took me from $30,000 in debt to ultimately selling my company for 9 figures. I think you'll like it.